What's up, YouTube? I'm back, and in this installment of my JavaScript tutorial for beginners, I'm going to talk about expressions and statements. I'll begin by defining exactly what statements and expressions are and how they relate to writing code. I'll then move on to examples of how to use these in code. And finally, I'm going to cover some debugging tips for working with expressions and statements in your JavaScript code. Let's get started. All right, what's an expression? I think it's best that I show a few examples that demonstrate expressions. 5. This is an example of an expression. Another example of an expression is 5 plus 3. We get 8. Another one is a string. For instance, if I wanted to do William, we get back William. It's an expression. We can also do string concatenation, so we can group expressions together, just like we did with our numbers, remember? So we can group things together. So I'll put a space, and then we'll put my last name, and we get back William Shepherd. So let's take a step back and give a formal definition of an expression, which happens to be one of the two primary programming codes that we use in JavaScript. An expression is anything that can be evaluated to a single and specific value. So you'll notice here that this whole expression can be evaluated down to this William Shepherd. In the previous examples, 5, this evaluates to 5. It is itself. In this example, we have two expressions. We have an expression here serving as an operand, and we have an expression here, 3, also serving as an operand. We combine these two together using an operator. So that's the next piece of what an expression is. You can think of an expression as being similar to phrases in English. While expressions technically can stand alone, just like English phrases, it's more common for expressions to be combined together using operators, which serve as conjugations as well as punctuation, if we were to keep this English simile going. Let's do a few more examples to kind of drive home the point of an expression. And I'm also going to give some additional context into the type of expression. Let's first define a variable. So we'll do let name equal, and we'll say will. This right here is a statement, but this statement contains an expression. This is the expression here. And to prove that, let's do name is equal to will with a capital W, and we'll go ahead and oops, sorry, I forgot to delete that. There we are. So we see that name results in William, this expression here. This right here is called an assignment expression. The reason why we call it an assignment expression is because we are using the assignment operator. Remember that we group expressions together using operators. In this case, the operator of choice is our assignment operator, so this becomes an assignment expression. Next, I want to show an expression statement. An expression statement is this right here. You've seen me use these before. 5, for instance, is an expression statement. This string right here is also an expression statement. Technically, these are literals, but literals as well as identifiers, whenever they are called like this, they become an expression statement. So this evaluates to a single and specific value, William. Next, I want to show an equality expression, or we can also call these logical expressions because it is going to return a true or a false. So let's do name, use strict equality, and I'm going to ask if the name is equal to Shepherd. And when I evaluate this, it should return a false. So you see here that this expression evaluates to a single specific value. In this case, it's false. If I want this to be true, I simply need to put William like so, and it becomes true. Next, I want to show a function call expression. Now, I haven't actually introduced functions yet, but those are coming up really soon. So it's good to introduce you to that now. There exists an object in the global scope. We'll discuss what scope is in a later video, but there's an object called console, and on that object, there is a function called log. And this function takes in an expression. That expression must evaluate to a string or be string-like, or can be coerced to a string. This is JavaScript after all. So let's put in hi and William, and we'll put a little exclamation mark because I'm excited. And then what do you know? We get back hi William. Now let's pay really close attention to this function call expression. You may be thinking that this is evaluating to hi William, a value. It's in fact not. the value that this is returning is undefined. This happens to be a side effect. According to Wikipedia, an operation, function, or expression is said to have side effects if it modifies some state variable values outside of its local environment. Another way of saying that is it's an observable effect other than the primary effect of returning that value to the invoker of that operation. So you call that function and something else happens outside of the state of that function. Let's show that off a little bit. I can do let's handle equal set, I think, let's see, set interval. I think I'll do that. And then I can give this a function. And the function I'm going to do is I'm going to log out. I'm going to call my console log. .log. And what I want to do is just log. I'm going to log the same thing over and over and over. So I'll just say test. How about that? And I want this to happen every second for demonstration purposes. Let's go ahead and do that. Notice here that this is a side effect. You see that this is counting down, and that's because it's giving me a different value each time. Let's change this a little bit. Let me do a, let's just refresh here. All right, so now I've reset my state. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a side effect within this function itself. So I'm going to say let I equal 0. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to print out I, like so. Notice that I'm just going to type in I. The reason why I can do this is because this log function, it takes anything that can be converted into a string. So because this is JavaScript, you can just pass in a number and it'll print it out as a string. All right. So in this function here, I'm going to add a curly brace, and this is just more syntax for you, so that I can do more than one line of code, I suppose. Unfortunately, the formatting is going to get weird. I apologize for that. But what I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to not do that. I'm going to instead, because I don't like that formatting. I really don't like that formatting. I'm not going to do it with that formatting. What I'm instead going to do is I'm going to do I++. And this is another side effect, actually. So we'll do that. And we'll get 0, we'll get 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. As you can see, this is a function that has multiple side effects. Number one is the set interval, right? It's going to call this function, this console log, which has side effects. And then I'm passing in an expression, I++ itself has side effects. So when I call this I++, what it's going to do is it's going to also increment that value. And the value that it's incrementing is this up here, which is outside of the local scope of this function. We'll get into scope after a while. All right, let's go on to the next topic. Statements are the other side of the coin for programming code. They perform specific actions. You could think of things like assigning a variable, printing the message to the screen like we just looked at with the side effects. Conditionals, which you haven't covered yet, but I will. Looping, again, more things that I'll cover in a later point. Keeping up with the analogy that I introduced for expressions, you can think of statements as complete sentences. They can also be keywords, however. They can be composed of other expressions. They can span multiple lines, or they could be a single line. They can also be empty. Let's jump into examples of statements. You've already seen a few statements. So if I define a const name and I set that equal to will, this whole thing here is a statement. Let's go ahead and do that. And you'll notice that this results in an undefined. And the reason behind that is that all statements return a completion value. Typically, that value is undefined, as you've noticed. Every time you do a const or a let or a var, you get back a undefined. However, there is one case where you won't get undefined. In that case is if you're using something called blocks. I'm not going to go into the specifics now. Just know that the completion value of a block is the last statement or expression within that block. However, we're not allowed to capture that value. So you can think of it. Actually, let's show an example. So I have this const name that's refresh. I need to get rid of all of my state, and let's call this a let. Now we're going to do let name. We'll do let name equal im. I'm trying to come up with an example. All right, and then here, what I want to do is I want to append will, because I am will, right? So we'll do name And we're going to use another operator. I haven't actually introduced this, but here's an example of one, plus equals. And I'm going to put will, right? So I'm actually going to get back a value. I'm going to get I am will. And the reason behind that is that this right here, this expression results in I am will. And that's the last expression inside of this block. So when I execute this, I should see I am will. However, when you are doing this, you cannot capture the last value in this block. So I can't do something like this. Let full name equal. I can't do that. And let's try to do that. I'm gonna comment this out. I haven't introduced comments, but we'll talk about those later. You probably won't use them. Most people don't, unfortunately. I use them though. Now, anyway, notice how this says missing colon after property ID. The reason why this is saying this is because this is invalid JavaScript grammar. So it's just like, you can't do this, right? It thinks that this is an object. That's why you can't do it. So if you remember in my second video on types, I introduced objects. It expects this right here. So I can do this and it will be happy. So if I were to now type in full name, we'll get back that object that I just created. So you can't assign the value from a block. Okay, that's statements. Let's talk about how to use expressions and statements together. To demonstrate using expressions and statements, what I want to do is show how I go from William to I am will. I'm going to make use of a comment, just FYI, a single line comment in JavaScript is // So we're going to do William to I am will. In order to do this, I'm first going to store my name in a read-only variable. Hopefully that makes sense. My name won't change. We'll say first name, and I'm going to set that equal to William. Note that this W is capitalized, whereas this W is not capitalized. So the first thing I want to do is solve for that. I want to figure out a way to get will in all lowercase. So what I'm going to do is define another read-only variable, and I'm going to call this short name, nickname too, I guess. And what I'm going to do is take first name, and I'm going to make use of a multi-line statement. I'm going to press enter, and I'm going to tab. You don't technically have to do tab, but it's nice to have things formatted nicely. I'm going to call the function called toLowerCase. We'll go into functions in a later video, but for now, just know that when I call this, it's going to result in first name being set to William, but in all lowercase. So the W will be lowercase. Next, I noticed that this will right here is the first 4 characters of my name. So I want to pull out a subset or a substring of this entire string. And there's actually a function called substr. And the arguments to that function is 0. In programming languages, we often start from 0. So 0 is actually this first element. And I want to take the first 4 elements. So I'm going to put a 4 here. That means that when I execute this, short name should have will in all lowercase. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make use of a function call expression to write my name to the console. The console, by the way, is just this little area over here. That's why it's a side effect. It's not actually happening in the JavaScript context. It happens over here in the debug console. All right. What I want to do, I want to say hi, William, or something like that. I'll say hi. We'll say hi, comma, and then I need to say, who am I, right? So we'll say plus. This is another. It's the same operator that you've seen for numbers, but when you use it with strings, it actually is performing something called concatenation. You could think of concatenation as combining 2 or more strings. So I want this IAM. And in order to do that, I'm going to make use of this substring function again. Let's put first name dot substring. And what I want is after this 4th character right here. The substring function actually has 2 variants, and the variant that I'm going to use this time is where I give it 1 argument. And the way that's going to work is I tell it where I want to start, and then it's going to return the rest. In this case, I want to start after will, or this L right here. Remember, it's 4, so I'm just going to put 5. Let's make this so that it's not weirdly formatted. So that's going to give me IAM. Now what I need to do is I need to append short name or concatenate. That's actually the technical term is concatenate. I'm going to concatenate short name. And then I'm going to do another concatenation, but this time I'm going to put a string literal exclamation point. When I run this, I should get back I am will. And I don't because I've made a mistake. That mistake is likely here. So let's put a 4 here. And I'm going to comment these things out and we'll rerun it. So now we get the right thing. Hi, I am will. The way we got this was we used several statements and expressions. So let's analyze this. I'm going to uncomment this out now. Now, the first thing we're doing is we're using a const declaration. That's what this is. This const declaration is a statement. Within this statement, there is a expression. This William is a string literal. That's an expression. Next, we declare another const. So this is a const declaration. This is another statement. Now we're using a multi-line statement. We notice that this first name is an identifier. This identifier evaluates to William. So you can almost think of this as just saying William. Now we're going to call a function to lowercase, and we're going to chain another function call onto that. We'll get into that when I talk about functions. Substring, which is going to give me back the WILL, all lowercase. And then we're going to assign that to short names. So this whole thing here is an expression. It evaluates to a single specific value, will in lowercase. Next, I have a function call expression. That function that I'm calling is log. Remember, it exists on this console object. I'm passing in several expressions into this function. I'm passing in a string literal hi, comma, space, and then I'm going to concatenate it with first name dot substring 4, which is this IAM. And then I concatenate it again with short name. Then I concatenate it again with a string literal exclamation point. Remember this right here, this is, even though I'm calling this concatenation or plus or whatever you want to call it, this is an operator. That's the key word. This is an operator. So I have an expression, operator, expression, operator, expression, operator, expression. All of these combined form a single expression. Remember, operators are just like punctuation. In this case, they are conjugation. I think that's the right word. Like we're combining. So this whole thing is essentially an expression. If I were to run this on its own, it would result in a single specific value, that value being hi, I am will. In fact, let's show that. Let's show how that works. So we'll take that out and I'm going to comment all of this out and we'll execute that and we get back hi, I am will. Notice that it's in strings this time. This is a string. And notice that this isn't a string. Remember, this is where the completion values come in. This console log function, let me just undo all of this. This console log function has a side effect. The side effect is to write something to the debug log. That's why this says debugger. If I were to just execute this expression on its own, I get back the string as you saw. So there you are. This is how we can use expressions and statements together to actually do something. Let's go over a few debugging tips. Let's start from the easiest one, keywords. Make sure you use the correct keyword. If you were to do LE, A equals, let's just say B, we get a syntax error. Why? Well, LE is not a keyword. It's all lowercase let. Same thing with const. So I can define a const. And in this case, what I need to make sure is that I use if I'm using strings, that I match my quotes. So I can either do single quotes like that, or I can do double quotes like this. What I can't do is a double quote followed by a single quote, or vice versa, a single quote followed by a double quote. That will result in a syntax error. Additionally, you need to make sure that the types of the values that you are operating with and within an expression are compatible. What do I mean by that? Let's refresh and let me clear all of this out. Let's say that I want to add a number together, a number with a string. Let's do A and we'll say A, B, C, or X. I'll do C. And let's add 5. technically, you can't do this. We get a result back. What you'll notice is that it appended them. If you're not expecting that behavior, this can result in bad things happening. Let's do some more work with this particular variable. I'm going to do a times 5. Notice that we get not a number. The reason why we get not a number is because we can't multiply. Like this asterisk doesn't mean anything when given a number and a string. Again, if I were to do false plus false, notice that I get back 0. So maybe you have a variable and one of them has false in it. And maybe you have another variable that has a number in it. Well, if you're not aware of the types of the values in your variable, then you can fall into a trap where you do something expecting one thing and then you get another result. And I think it's worth noting here that false will evaluate to 0. Let's see what true does. Take a guess before I run it. What do you think is going to happen? We get back 2. Why is that? Well, if you remember in my previous video, when I went over truth tables, I said that we tend to represent false as 0 and true as 1. So in this case, we have 1 plus 1. Again, this behavior is probably not what you're expecting. So it's really important that you pay attention to the values and their types and make sure that whatever you're doing is really compatible. Otherwise, you will get into the weirdness of JavaScript. And this is one of those cases. If I were to do true plus false, what do you think I would get? If you said 1, you're right, because remember, true is 1, false is 0. But let's see if we can multiply these things. Let's see if that works. We get back 0. That doesn't make sense. What if I wanted to divide true by false? What am I going to get? I get infinity. Does that make sense? Probably not. Again, you have to pay attention to the types of your values. Otherwise, you are in for a tough time. Let's see what happens if we define an object. Let's call it obj. Well, I'll just call it O. And this is going to be an empty object. I'm curious what's going to happen if I were to add an object to a number. I get back object, and 5. Again, if you're not aware of the type in your object, then you're going to be thrown off. The reason why we get object here is because this is going to be interpreted as a string because of this plus and this 5. So effectively, it's going to try to, JavaScript thinks that what you want to do is concatenate 2 strings. Again, that doesn't make sense. Let's also try to multiply. Let's see what we get. We get not a number. Well, that should make sense because we have an object and we're trying to multiply it by a number. There is no operator that supports such a function. If we were to divide, we should also get not a number. But let's see what happens if I were to add this or divide this object by a string, A. I get not a number, right? So just remember that whenever you are working with these expressions and statements that you keep in mind the grammar. Now let's rewind back to when I discussed statements. I mentioned that you can have multiple statements on a single line. I want to show how that looks. Const A, I think I have to refresh. Const A is equal to an empty object. Const B is equal to false. And for good measure, let's do a let here. Let's do let C, that's an X, I'm sorry. Let C equal 3. If I run this, I'm going to get a syntax error. Unexpected token, keyword const. This is where it's really, really useful to like read the error message and really try to understand what it's saying. In this case, it's saying that it's on line 1. That's what this right here is. Debug eval code 1. It's on line 1. But there's this 13 right here. So that means that it's not this const here because this is the 13th character. So if we count, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Pay attention to what your debugger will output, it will often tell you exactly where your error is. If we want to fix this, we have to use semicolons. Remember, using my analogy, operators can also serve as punctuation. In this case, we have to put a semicolon so that the JavaScript interpreter knows that this is a new declaration happening. If I do this, now it works. So if I wanted to see what A is, I can get back A. And if I want to see what C is, I get back C. Here's what you should take away from this video. Expressions are always evaluated to a single value. Expressions can be combined with other operators to form more significant expressions. Statements are composed of expressions and they perform a specific action, and they all return a completion value. If this video has been helpful, please consider liking and subscribing. It will help me significantly grow this channel. And if you have any feedback, please drop a comment. I will be reading these and trying to improve from here. Thanks.